Hi there, I'm Dr. Carlin Vigna, and I'm the percussion professor at Shenandoah Conservatory in Winchester, Virginia. I'm here today with some practice tips for the percussion etude for the Virginia District 11 All-District Band auditions. In this etude, students play short excerpts on snare drum, xylophone, and timpani with just 3 measures of rest in between. So I definitely recommend practicing each of these excerpts separately while you're learning the material. But once you have them well learned and really well prepared, it is so important that you make sure to practice these 3 excerpts all in a row, just how they're written, and with the instruments set up, just how they'll be in the audition, once you have everything learned really well. So let's get started with this snare drum excerpt. There are a number of challenges here. The grace note figures, flams, drags, and 1 4-stroke rough, dynamic contrast, and then just keeping a steady pulse through some pretty complicated rhythms. Make sure that you're working on rolls. In this case, there's 1 decrescendo roll from mezzo forte to piano, and it's really important to be able to do that smoothly. There are also 2 shorter pianissimo rolls, so make sure that you're working on your soft snare drum rolls as well. I find a 16th note roll bass to be very comfortable at this tempo. I generally follow right hand lead sticking when I'm playing musical material on snare drum, and this excerpt is no exception. The triplet at the end of measure 2 makes me follow alternating sticking just through the start of measure 3, but in measure 4, I'm able to reset by starting the triplet on the left. The sticking for the 4-stroke rough in measure 5 can be up to your preference, as long as you're able to achieve rhythmic evenness through the 3 grace notes, and as long as you have an increase in volume that allows the grace notes to lead into the main note. Those things are really important. My preference here is right, left, right, but alternating the grace notes or other options could also work. I like to keep the main note of flams and drags on the right hand throughout this excerpt, but some players might have different preferences on that. Make sure to pay really close attention to detail here, including what's accented and what's not. Measure 8 is pretty tricky to work out with those flams and accented notes. Make sure to practice this one slowly. And finally, don't forget to turn those snares off before you head over to the xylophone. This xylophone excerpt has some tricky passages as well. There are quick scalar passages, both major and chromatic. There are some rolls and then some arpeggiations. I'd recommend working these challenges into your daily warm-up so you have greater success and accuracy when you're playing and learning the excerpt. It's important not to be too heavy when you're rolling on xylophone. Just try not to move your hands faster than you can move in a fluid and relaxed way, because any tension in the roll is going to make it sound less smooth. Kind of the opposite of what we want. So I would recommend starting with slow metronome work on this one. When I was learning it, I started at half tempo, dotted quarter equals 41, and I slowly increased the tempo as I became comfortable with the passage. My approach is generally to learn complicated passages like this at a slow tempo with all of the musical elements, with the dynamics, phrasing, stickings, everything, and then maintain all of those elements as I increase the tempo. And I find this to be so much more efficient than learning all of the notes first and then later adding the dynamics and other musical elements, because you get muscle memory every time you're playing. And if you play this passage over and over again without the dynamics and try to add it later, you kind of have to relearn that. So I'd prefer to have everything from the start, even though it requires slower practice a lot of the time. Make sure that you're using a smooth legato stroke through measures 12 and 16, so that you're making sure to show the slurs in those measures. For the crescendo in measure 14 into measure 15, you'll have to compensate for the fact that the xylophone will typically not speak as loudly in the upper range. So make sure to push so you reach your peak dynamic of the whole excerpt on the C sharp, the high C sharp in measure 15. The grace note figures in measure 15 can be a little tricky. Just make sure to work on the timing so that the grace note is in fact coming before the main note. I would recommend some serious metronome work to make sure that you don't lose track of time during the rolls in measure 16. And in particular, I find it's easy to cut the longer roll on E, the final roll, a little shorter than it should be because it's longer than the others. For the arpeggiations in measures 17 and 18, make sure to be thinking about the actual chords you're outlining rather than just thinking of them as random notes, because you've practiced these. Hopefully you've practiced these arpeggios. And I think this will make it easier and quicker to learn and also to play. And finally, be careful with the balance in the final notes here. I think of the top notes, the C sharp and the A, as more melodic content, and the bottom notes, the E and the A, sol, do, as harmonic. But the lower range of the instrument is going to speak much more loudly than the upper range if you just play the two hands at the same volume. So it's really important to bring out the right hand here. Now, this timpani excerpt has a few different articulations that we need to pay close attention to. In accented passages like measure 23 of this excerpt, I use more of a quicker wrist stroke to be able to emphasize the start of each note and really achieve clarity there. And the staccato that's marked in measure 27 will be played with a quicker wrist stroke as well. For the forte piano crescendo roll, I like to put a small amount of space after the initial forte before starting the piano roll. This allows the volume to come down, and then you can kind of sneak in with that piano roll. Don't feel like you have to go straight into the piano rolling after the forte attack at the start. Try to make the rolls in measures 32 and 33 as connected as possible by moving smoothly between the drums, which is another thing you can work into your warm-ups to be able to apply here in the excerpt. And work to make sure that you can play crescendos and decrescendos really smoothly as you're moving around the drums as you have to in these measures. Make sure to pay close attention to which notes are accented in this excerpt too. So I hope this is helpful as you prepare for your auditions. Please feel free to email me if you have any questions. My email's in the notes below. And I hope I get the chance to work with you in person someday. Take care.